To begin with business and immigration law updates. This is a presentation of the Khurana Law Firm in Rockville, Maryland, where the Chief Attorney at Law is Attorney Ramesh Khurana. The moderators here are Attorney Kenneth Haber. This morning, Attorney Haber questions Attorney Khurana on non-immigrant status, or rather the U visa. Let's join these two attorneys in their legal dialogue.
Hello, I'm Kenneth Haber, former Assistant United States Attorney and former Senior Attorney in the Office of Inspector General of Health and Human Services, and this is the Capitol Forum. With me today is Ramesh Khurana, well-known international attorney who does immigration work across the country and across the world. Ramesh, welcome.
Thank you very much, Ken, and I really appreciate your generous introduction.
Well, it's all earned, well earned. I know the quality of your work. Today, the U visa is the topic of our conversation. And could you please explain to the audience what the U visa is? What was the intent of Congress to legislate the U visa?
My dear friend, I knew it. You would love this topic because you are a former prosecutor, you are a former assistant United States attorney. So, U visa is meant for the victims of crime. Now, we see so many victims who fall basically to the bad intent of the people in the society, and especially you see ladies now who are brought from the rest of the world to the United States, and they are subjected to prostitution, or even they get married and they become battered spouses. So, it applies to all those kinds of persons who become victims of some crimes. So, these kinds of people, now these are protected by the law enforcement agencies, and immigration authorities, USCIS, that has also come forward as a result of the legislation which was enacted in 2000, and they have basically introduced a visa to help these victims of crime, and that is called U visa.
Are there any special crimes that are covered by the U visa, or is it just any crime?
In fact, Ken, all those crimes, those have been already defined very well because it's a statutory scheme, and only those particular crimes are eligible for grant of U visa. To give you some example, like I mentioned a few words in my introduction, some people are subjected to prostitution, and some ladies come here and they are subjected to domestic violence, or there may be sexual assault, or all these kinds of murders, manslaughters. So, all these crimes have been very well defined, and I have seen in my experience most of the times we are using this U type of visa status for those ladies who come from different parts of the world, and they get married to US citizens or green card holders or some other persons who may be in any kind of status, even like people who are on H-1B status. If H-1B status wife, she gets into trouble because of the problems created by her husband, now she may be entitled for U visa.
Does that mean that they're normally in this country where they are when they're applying for the U visa, or can they be out of the country and apply for the U visa?
Ken, that's a very good question. The only requirement is that crime should take place within the territory of the United States. Now, if the crime has taken place within the territory of the United States and that person has moved outside the United States, still that person continues to be eligible to apply for U visa.
So, if a woman's brought over here for white slavery, she would be able to break away from her captors, apply for a U visa, not have to be concerned about being sent back because of retaliation by her captors.
You said it, and this is how law enforcement agencies, they will come to the help of this kind of victim, and then of course there is an immigration procedure to be followed.
And what is that procedure? How does one follow it?
Okay. The way it starts is basically first off, evaluation has to be done by an experienced attorney. Now, you have to look at the kind of crime which we are talking about, whether that crime is covered under the statutory scheme or not. And once you have identified that this crime is covered under the scheme, then you have to look at the record which has been created. Whether, let's say, we talk about domestic violence. Now, when this domestic violence took place, now we start, did you call any, make any call for 911? So that becomes the starting point, and the person says, yes, I did. So then you look at the 911 records, and then you ask the question, did you ever apply for the protective order? And if you applied for the protective order, whether it was granted or not. So you collect all these records and look at these records, like what was the disposition in the court and what kind of cooperation this person has been extending to the law enforcement agencies, because law enforcement agencies would like to prosecute this kind of offender, and they will need the cooperation of the victim.
Very good, very good. That gives some insight into this type of situation. Is there a limitation on number of U visas that are available, like in so many of the other cases?
Yes. In fact, there is a yearly quota, and these numbers are fixed every year, and the cap is at 10,000. Just 10,000 U visas are issued. That doesn't mean that if more than 10,000 applications are filed within one particular year. So what they do is USCIS is going to prepare a waiting list, and they will keep everything in the waiting list. And the advantage of applying in a timely manner is, even though you are on the waiting list, still you may be granted a status of a parolee, and you may be entitled for the work permit, so that the person who is a victim, that person may start working right away.
In a legitimate field.
Yes, yes.
What is called a qualifying agency? What's the definition of a qualifying agency, and how does that play in the scheme that Congress set up?
Yeah, Ken, when we are talking about the qualifying agencies, these could be federal, state, county and local agencies. If some crime can be identified as a federal crime, and federal prosecutors are involved. So basically this is the U.S. Attorney's Office, your former office, which gets involved, and they would be called a certifying agency for that purpose. So the purpose of the certifying agency here is they have to basically sign a certification which would say that this crime has taken place, and this person is a victim of that crime, and this person has been extending us necessary cooperation, and we want this person to be here because we have to prosecute the perpetrator of the crimes, and we want his testimony, we want his witness, and that's why this becomes a kind of in the interest of prosecution, law enforcement agencies. So all these three agencies are entitled to sign the certification, including judges or police officers.
This certainly is a step above what we had available to us when I was in the U.S. Attorney's Office. Can anybody hold such a U visa, or does it have to be other than the victim? Can anyone, other than a victim of a crime, hold a U visa? Is there some other way a person can get a hold of this?
Yeah, yes. When we are talking about the way I have understood your question is like any person other than the victim of the crime.
Yes.
So let's say victim of the crime is the wife who has been subjected to sexual assault or prostitution. Now, if she is entitled for U visa and she is married, I'm just supposing it, her husband is entitled, and her children under 21, they are also entitled for U visa because they want to keep the family together.
Well, that's hopeful. That's helpful.
That's right.
Have you had any experiences in these U visas yourself?
Yes, Ken. In fact, I have successfully handled a few U visa cases, and it was a very challenging task. But the good thing is that local agencies were involved in these cases at the county level, and all these law enforcement agencies were very helpful to the victim, and we communicated well, and finally we were successful.
Very good. What was the nature of the crime in that particular situation?
I handled 2 cases recently. In both these cases, this was an issue of domestic violence.
So the wife was the victim, I presume?
Yes, yes.
And I presume the husband didn't get any qualifications when he was the perpetrator.
Yes, you're right.
But the children would be eligible for it.
Children under 21, they would be eligible for U status.
Well, that's really good to know. What are some of the other well-known circumstances where the U visa is employed?
You know, the benefit of U visa is because it is more or less similar to WAVA. You might have heard about WAVA, which was also legislated by Congress in the year 2000. But the problem with the WAVA cases is that eligibility for that kind of status extends to the wives of green card holder or citizens. But U visa basically can be granted to anybody. Now, who is here without any status or who is here in status? Let us say she is the spouse of a person who is holding an H-1B visa or who is holding an L-1 visa. So, of course, that person is not the US citizen and that person is not even the green card holder. So, under these circumstances, this type of spouse can be granted U visa. Again, when the recommendations have to be made by the local law enforcement agencies, they would like to make sure that the crime has really taken place and the testimony of this person is going to be very helpful in prosecuting the perpetrator of the crime. So, all these factors are taken into account. Now, again, there is a process involved, like how do you handle U visa application. In order to handle a U visa application, you have to file an application on form I-918, just for the benefit of audience, form I-918. And the way I advise my clients is just write your story from your heart, like what happened to you. It should not be a stereotype of thing. Just write your story from day 1 to the last day when the crime was completed. If you explain your story from your heart, I am pretty sure it's going to be very persuasive with the USCIS and chances of approval of U visa are very high.
Very good. I imagine they've used these for organized crime type of situations?
Again, it depends. If there is an organized crime and the victim is somebody and who needs this kind of immigration support, because the intent is that why this kind of person who has been subjected to some kinds of crimes are being exploited because of her visa status should not be just forced to leave the United States and go out of the country. They would like to keep that person here, so long as that person is willing to extend necessary cooperation for the prosecution of the perpetrator of crime.
No doubt that is something that the DEA is glad to have available to it.
That's right, yeah.
Well, thank you very much for coming in and sharing your information, your knowledge about the U visa. I'm sure it's been very informative for everybody.
Thank you very much, Ken. I appreciate for inviting me here. And as always, I would like to advise the audience, please consult with an experienced immigration lawyer so that you know your rights and you apply for U visa status in a timely manner. Thank you very much for being with us.